According to a recent study of the scientific community, there is little doubt that greenhouse gases are beginning to warm the Earth. But the general consensus among scientists stops there. According to the study, there is substantial disagreement among climate researchers about if and how this warming will change the planet. Dr. Thomas Stewart heads the research division at the Center for Policy Research at the State University of New York at Albany. He discovered the widespread disagreement when he surveyed more than 100 scientists working on the global climate.
Based on the study that we've done, I would have to emphasize that there is substantial disagreement among scientists about global warming, although not about the direction of global warming, but rather about its magnitude and its impacts. Some scientists feel that will be small and something that we can easily adapt to, and these are well-qualified scientists whose views can't easily be dismissed. Others agree that it's going to be a change of a magnitude that's unprecedented certainly in human history, and that it's going to be something that will require something that will cause severe disruption and serious problems.
Stewart based his survey questions on a prediction by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a United Nations-sponsored group. The IPCC predicted the global temperature will increase by 0.3 of a degree centigrade per decade, with an uncertainty range of between 0.2 and 0.5 of a degree. Despite widespread public acceptance of these figures, Stewart says he found many atmospheric and oceanic scientists are skeptical.
We found that the group that responded could be sorted into about three groups. One group endorsed the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they assigned a probability of it being correct of about 80%. There was another group of skeptics who tended to discount the possibility of it being correct. Their probability was around 20%. And then there was a group in the middle who fell between the other two groups, and plus they had a much wider range of uncertainty than the other two groups. Their lower bound on their prediction corresponded to the group of skeptics, and the upper bound on their prediction corresponded more to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Some researchers have called these three groups hawks, the people who are strongly concerned about climate change in the future, the doves who tend to discount the possibility of it, and the owls who tend to focus on the uncertainty.
Stewart says he did not question enough scientists sufficiently to determine an exact percentage in each category. His subjects were drawn from an electronic mail service heavily used by atmospheric and oceanic scientists. But among those he did poll, he found each group substantial enough to deserve serious consideration. According to Stewart, therein lies the problem. He says the public does not recognize these differences, and he argues media coverage is partially to blame.
There was one study which we didn't do, which looked at what the press is reporting to the public, and concluded, based on 400 articles, that the press reports indicated general endorsement of the global warming hypothesis, whereas surveys of scientists indicate much more disagreement than seems to be coming out in the press.
As a public policy researcher, Stewart says his main goal is to help those who make public policy decisions. When it comes to issues like climate change, he says these people need to understand how scientists make their decisions and why they do not agree. Contributing to the disagreement on the greenhouse effect, Stewart found several factors.
Clearly, there are differences in training and experience among scientists, and differences in what they accept as evidence. Some scientists rely strongly on the historical climate record, tree rings, ice cores, and they are heavily weighting empirical evidence. Other scientists develop global climate models, complicated computer models, and they rely heavily on the predictions of those models. And this is a function of their training and their beliefs about how science should be done. And I think those kinds of differences in what evidence scientists select is part of the reason that they disagree. They also differ in how they use that evidence to draw a conclusion. They may rely on different analogies or metaphors to draw conclusions from data. They just have different ways of organizing the information and applying it to making a judgment.
Many people blame the discrepancies on scientists' political views, but Stewart found that while researchers did disagree on the possible extent of global warming, they stood together on the issues of public policy. The majority of scientists he polled supported strong government intervention.
We expected to find that scientists agree on scientific principles, which they do. The most agreement is that the greenhouse effect is real. That is, that there is warming of the Earth caused by greenhouse gases. There's not disagreement about that. But they agreed almost as strongly on general policy questions, questions about what should be done. We have to qualify that somewhat because the questions that are asked in surveys about policy are quite general. They're questions like the question we used in our survey, which was a quote from a scientist, which said, current uncertainties are such that inaction is the appropriate policy. Most scientists, about 75%, disagreed with that. But we didn't try to pin them down onto exactly what actions should be taken and at what cost. And it may well be that when scientists, like other citizens, are pinned down to consider specific actions and specific costs, that there won't be so much agreement among them.
Dr. Thomas Stewart is the Director of Research at the Center for Policy Research at the State University of New York at Albany. He says his current research is focusing on specifics. He plans to conduct in-depth interviews with scientists to learn more about their decision-making patterns and underlying beliefs. Ultimately, he says, he hopes public officials will have more information to evaluate when they consider a scientific issue. In the case of global warming, he says officials on both sides need to take alternative views into account before making a decision. This is Bruce Robertson.